We begin today the Gemara on Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, the second line down from the top of the Yamud. We're in the middle of the sugya of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach. So the Gemara here brings up other details regarding things that apply to the B'nai Noyach, the Goyim. So the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Oivik Kechavim Sha'isik B'Teira, a guy that learns Teira, Chayiv Misa. He's Chayiv Misa for this. Shenamar, because the pasuk says, Teira Tziva Lanu Moshe. Teira, the Eibush, the Moshe Rabbeinu is commanded to us. Meirasha, and then it says it's a Meirasha. What does Meirasha mean? Lanu Meirasha V'lei Lahem. It's our inheritance and not theirs. And therefore, a guy is not. That's a source that a guy is not allowed to learn Teira. And if he does, he's Chayiv Misa.
It's only source not allowed to learn, but not a source of Misa.
But anytime a guy is warned about anything, Azarasan Zui Misasan, a guy that doesn't fulfill any of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach and anything else that he's warned to do or not to do, Azarasan Zui Misasan. That's the cloud by a guy.
So you're keeping him where he is, you're not
correct.
letting him get
correct. That's
get higher in life.
That's 1 second. We'll explain soon in a second. But that's the halacha. That's what applies to a guy. If this is the case, why don't we count this as one of the 7 the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach? Answers the Gemara, so there's 2 ways out of darshan. The pasuk we just brought, Meirasha. Either the word Meirasha means it's our inheritance, and therefore migzal kagazilei. When he learns the Torah that belongs to Yidden, he's stealing from Yidden. So that's already part of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, Gzeila. But then there's another opinion that the drasha is me'oy rasa. That the Torah and the Yidden are like this, it's a marriage. It's like a naira, dinay kenaira mayrasa. So then the halacha of the guy that takes the Torah that's married to a Yid is like taking a naira mayrasa, the beskila. And therefore the guy is chayiv skila for this. So that's also included in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, the Gilui Arayis is one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, and therefore it's not counted separately. The Gemara asks on this, is it really true that a guy is not allowed to learn Torah? Meisvei. But it says in the Braisa that Rab Meir would say, how do I know that even a guy that learns Torah, Shuhu Kohen Gadol, that he's as great as a Kohen Gadol? Shanamba, because the pasuk says that Sheyase Oisam Ha'adam V'chai Bahem. It says if a person Ha'adam will do what it says in the Torah V'chai Bahem and he lives with this. So the Gemara says, Kainim, Leviim, V'Yisraelim, Lo Nama. It doesn't use in the Torah the expression of Kainim or Leviim or Yisraelim, Ela Ha'adam. It says the word Ha'adam. Olam Adata, Shafila, Ovid, Kechavim, V'Yisik B'Teira, Harei Kohen Gadol. That even a guy that learns Torah is on the level of a Kohen Gadol. So Rashi here says that the term Ha'adam, we had before, Rashi brought it, says in the Gemara Yivamis, that the term Adam refers only to Yidden. Atem kruyim Adam. Only Yidden are called Adam. So if that's the case here, Ha'adam refers only to Yidden. So Rab Meir argues with this. Rab Meir says that Ha'adam refers even to a guy. Taisvis here says that there's a difference if it says Adam or Ha'adam. When it says Adam, it refers only to Yidden. But when it says Ha'adam, the human being, it includes even a guy. And therefore, Rab Meir is not arguing. He says that it says Ha'adam and it includes even a guy. And says the Gemara, Hassam, and that pasuk where it includes even a guy, B'Sheva mitzvahs didahu. This is when they learn their halachas that are relevant for their Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach. That's what a guy should learn in Torah. But if a guy learns all of Torah, Taryag mitzvahs, so then, going back to what it said before, a guy is chayiv misa. So what's the reason for this? Why if a guy learns Torah is he chayiv misa? So one of the Rishonim it says, the reason is, imagine if all Goyim would be learning Torah like Yidden, so then Yidden would be learning from Goyim. So then if you're going to be learning Torah from Goyim, so then there won't be a distinction between a Yid and a guy. You learn Torah from a guy. So the Eibush said the Torah is dedicated for Yidden Dafka, belongs to them, whether it's Gzeila or Ma'irasa, and you shouldn't end up learning Torah from a guy. That's the simple pshat that it says in the Rishonim. The Rebbe in the Sikha explained that the whole idea of Torah, aliba de emes, is not the seichel of the Torah, the intellect of the Torah, it's the Eibush in the Torah. So when it says here that a guy could learn Torah b'Sheva Mitzvahs Didhu, what it's saying is to learn Torah, to understand the intellect of Torah, and to apply it to Ma'aseh B'Poyel, that a guy has. That aspect of Torah, the seichel of the Torah, a guy has. If you look at the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach, and at least according to the Ramban, one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noyach is Dinin, which refers to all monetary law. That means that a guy could learn Baba Kavan, Baba Metzia, Baba Basra. It's a very big part of Torah that a guy is allowed to learn. But it's all the seichel of the Torah in order to apply it in life, to have a civil life and so on, how to live in this world. The Torah that Yidden have, that the Gemara is referring to here, that a guy, that the Torah that's married to Yidden, that's a different level of Torah, that's the Torah where it's the Eibishter the Torah, the Neisna Torah, with the Birchas Torah. It's that level of Torah that's not Shaykh to Gayim. Rab Chanina ben Gamliel Leimer Af Hadam Anachai. This is going back, quoting what it said before in Abraisa in the Gemara, that one of the Shavuot mitzvahs ben Noach is Evim Anachai, not to eat from a limb from a living animal. So Rab Chanina ben Gamliel says it includes also blood from a living animal as well. So here the Gemara brings the details, the source of this. Tana Rabbanon, in Abraisa we learned. It says in the pasuk Ach Basar ben Nafshay Damoy Loisechelo. What does this pasuk mean? This is after the Mabul. So in this pasuk it's saying Zeh Evim Menachai. It refers to Evim Menachai because when it says Basar benafshay, it means the basar, the flesh of the nefesh of an animal that's still alive, and the damai, the dam is the nefesh of the animal. So loisechelo. Rab Chanina ben Gamliel says Afadam Menachai. That when it says in this pasuk the term Basar benafshay, then it says damai. That means that it's saying that even blood from a living animal is also asr, like Evim Menachai. My time that Rab Chanina ben Gamliel, why does Rab Chanina ben Gamliel say this? Because he says the word dama is extra. It says nafshay, that it's alive. It's a living limb of an animal, a limb from a living animal. Why does it have to add dama, that the life of the animal is in the blood? Because it's a separate point. So therefore, Kri Bey, you read the pasuk as if it's written basar benafshay loisechelo, that the basar, which is the limb, that if it comes from a living animal, you shouldn't eat it, and also dama benafshay loisechel, and you don't eat the blood either. It's two separate things. Rabbanon, according to the Rabbanon, why does the pasuk spell out damai? Hahu lemishri shratzim huda asa. What it's coming to say is that by shratzim, a limb of a creeping, crawling animal that crawls on the ground and very small, over there's no isser of evim and achai. And we'll see later soon. The Gemara is going to bring and explain the source for this, because only by an animal that has basar and it has dam, and the basar is one thing, and the dam is something else. The dam is where the chayis of the animal is, and the basar is. So over there, when there's basar and dam, is there the isser of evrim and achai. By a sheretz, the basar and the dam is one thing, and over there, the isser of evrim and achai does not apply. Similar to what it says here regarding the bnei Noach, this pasuk before Matan Torah, similar. There's a pasuk that it says regarding the isser of eating blood or drinking blood after Matan Torah. It says, Rak chazak levilti achoil adam ki adam hu nefesh v'gaimer. So it says here in the pasuk that you should not eat blood, and why? Because adam hu nefesh. What's the pasuk coming to say according to Rab Chanina ben Gamliel? So before there in the pasuk it says the isser of evim and achai. In that, if you look at the Gaimer here, what's the continuation of that pasuk actually? It says in the pasuk v'lo seichel hanefesh im abasar. That's the isser of evim and achai. But it doesn't only say the isser of evim and achai in the pasuk. It also says ki adam hu nefesh, and then it says v'lo seichel nefesh im abasar. So according to Rab Chanina ben Gamliel, in this pasuk itself as well, it's telling you that there are two isurim. There's the isser of evim and achai, and there's the isser of dam and achai. Just like before Matan Torah, by Ben Noach, there's the Isser of Evim and Achai and Dam and Achai. The same thing also by Yidden after Matan Torah. In this pasuk, you see these two Isurim. Okay, Rashi is not good. It's the next part of the Gemara here, which is in parentheses. The Rabbanon, how do they understand this? That the pasuk over here says the Isser of Evim and Achai, and then also the Isser of Dam. The Rabbanon don't hold that there's such a thing as the Isser of Dam and Achai. That's similar to Evim and Achai. So how did the Rabbanon learn this? The Rabbanon say as follows: there's an isser of drinking blood from an animal, which is an isser kares, separate isser of blood. When does that isser apply? So the Rabbanon say as follows: you look there in the Psukim, Rashi here brings, right before that it says in the Pasuk, V'zavachta, mipkarcha, mitzaycha, it talks about shechita, shechting an animal. So you would understand that the isser of eating blood from an animal would only apply to an animal after it's shechted, that you have to salt it, and you shouldn't eat the blood from the animal. That's what you would think. So therefore this pasuk here is putting the isser of Evim and Achai in this pasuk in order to let you know that the isser of eating blood from an animal also applies to the dam hakaze. That's the literal translation of dam hakaze is bloodletting. When the blood comes out of the animal, and that's the blood shanashama yotzebay, the blood that's when the animal dies, when this blood leaves the animal, that the isser of eating blood from the animal, that there's a chi of kares for this, applies to this blood as well. This is the first blood that comes from the animal when you shecht it. This is blood that's very dark. It's almost like blackish. So this is the blood that the Isser of Kodesh applies to it. That's what the Rabbanan learn from here. So in other words, the pshat over here is that according to Rav Chanina ben Gamliel, there's a Isser of eating blood from a living animal similar to Evim and Achai. And that Isser is actually not a Isser Kodesh. Evim and Achai is not a Isser Kodesh. Similar also, the blood from a living animal is not an Isser Kodesh. And that's not only the blood Shanashama Yetzibay, as the Rabbanan say, any blood from a living animal. Ashenkin the Rabbanan say there is no Isser on blood similar to Evim and Achai. However, there is the Isser of Dam, which is a Isser Kodesh. And over here, the pasuk is coming to compare to Evim and Achai, that if it's specifically the blood that is coming out of the animal, Shanashama Tluyabay, that's when the animal dies, when this blood leaves its body, that's included in the Isser Dam, where there's a Chi of Kodesh. That's what the Rabbanan learned this. Okay, but now the Gemara goes back to what we just said here, that we find this Isser, according to Rav Chanina ben Gamliel, we find this Isser of Dam similar to Evrim and Achai, that it's written in the Torah by the Bnei Noach, and it's written again the same thing, B'negei to Yidden after Matan Torah. So the question is, why does it have to repeat the same Isser of Dam and Achai according to Rabbi Gamliel regarding Goyim and also after Matan Torah? What would I think that when the Eibishter gave Yidden the Torah, so the Isurim of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach doesn't apply to them anymore? The Eibishter gave the Torah and now those things that they already obligated from before was removed. Why would I think it shouldn't apply even after Matan Torah? So it's not necessary to repeat again the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. In this case, according to Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, blood, if it's already also from before. So the Gemara says, no, actually it's not this way. Because Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina, it's based on what Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina said. Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina. Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina said the following klal regarding those Yisurim that it says in the Torah before Matan Torah. Call mitzvah shenamar of Bnei Noach, any mitzvah that we find that's written in the Torah for the Bnei Noach before Matan Torah, and then v'nishnis b'Sinai, and it's repeated again in the Torah after Matan Torah and Sinai. That what that means is lezeh or lezeh nemra. That's an indication that this is an issa that applies to Yidden, and it also applies to the Goyim before. But if it was Nemral of Noach, but if you see that it's something that says in the Torah before Matan Torah, only for the Bnei Noach, and then the Leinish B'Sinai, and then afterwards, after Matan Torah, it's not repeated in the Torah again, what that actually means is Li Yisrael Nemra. This is something which is a Isser and a mitzvah that applies only to Yidden, V'Loy Bnei Noach, and it doesn't apply to Goyim. Right, so this is a unique klal here. The Gemara is going to discuss this klal. The point of this klal is, where Rashi explains it, that if something is written before Matan Torah and then it's written again after Matan Torah, what it's coming to say is that the Pashtus, the Eibishter gave Yidden the Torah, so now from this point forward, the Eibishter is saying all the Isurim that applied before, I want to designate it that it should be only for Yidden. And Yidden should have that kedusha to have to fulfill these mitzvahs. And all other Goyim now lose that obligation or that connection that they had in those mitzvahs that they were obligated before. So if therefore if it only says it once, and then the Eibishter gives Yidden the Torah, so then I'll say, what happened now when the Eibishter gave Yidden the Torah? He took away from the Goyim those mitzvahs. But if the mitzvah says before and it says it again after, then I know that the reason why it's repeating it again is because what it said before remains for Goyim, and it's being said again that the Yidden have to fulfill it. But the mitzvahs that they are not repeated, so then that remains only for Yidden. That's the concept of what Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina is saying here. The Gemara is going to ask questions on this, as we'll see.
But if it's not repeated, who was said originally for?
It was said for the Goyim, but then when the Eibishter gave the Yidden the Torah, he took it away from them. It didn't repeat it, so the Eibishter took it away from them, and he's giving Torah to Yidden that it's dafka for Yidden to fulfill.
But that wasn't Torah, you said.
It wasn't?
Torah.
But now the Eibishter gave the Torah and sanctified Yidden, and now it's only Yidden that have to fulfill it. That's why it doesn't repeat it again. He took it away from them.
For example, by Bris Milah?
Everything's coming. Let's see in the Gemara here. So now the Gemara says, "Va'anu ein lanu elo gidanosha." The only example that we have for this, where a mitzvah that was said already before Matan Torah and it was not repeated again, and it's also only for Yidden and not for Goyim, the example for this is only one, gidanosha, and only valiba de Rabbi Yehuda, only according to Rabbi Yehuda. Gidanosha says in the Torah in Parashas Vayishlach, and it's not repeated later, and this is a mitzvah that applies only to Yidden. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, before Matan Torah, the mitzvah of Gidanosha applied to Goyim as well. But then when the Eibishter gave the Torah, and it was not repeated, so the Eibishter took it away from them. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But Rashi here brings, the Rabbanan disagree with this. The Rabbanan say that Gidanosha is l'chatchila, a mitzvah that was given only for Yidden. It would never apply to Goyim. It wasn't set to Goyim b'chlal before. It was set to Yidden after Matan Torah. Elamai, the Eibishter, it was written in the Torah, in the place where the story happened, so you should understand what the reason of the mitzvah is. But it was only written there, but it was only said one time after Matan Torah, so therefore that's not an example for what we're talking about. Or according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is an example that it applied before. Actually, the emphasis Rashi says that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, even before Matan Torah, it wasn't really for all the Bnei Noach. It was only for the children of Yaakov. It says there clearly in the pasuk Zaracha. But nevertheless, it is an example of a mitzvah that was already said before Matan Torah, and it was not repeated after, and it's shaykh only for Yidden. That's the only example we have. Okay, the Gemara is going to discuss here now all the details of what Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina said. Let's see. So, Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina said, "Kol mitzvah shenemra levnei noach," a mitzvah that was already given for the bnei noach, and it's written in the Torah, v'nishnos b'Sinai, and it's repeated after Matan Torah by Sinai. Lezeh or lezeh nemra. It was said for both, for the Yidden and for the Goyim as well. But the Gemara asks on this, Adarabbe, maybe I should say that the opposite is true. The fact that the Eibishter is repeating it by Sinai, why is he repeating it? He's coming to say that until now it was for the Goyim, and I'm repeating it now again for the Yidden to say that it should be designated only for Yidden. Maybe that's how I should understand it. And not for the Bnei Noach. So the Gemara answers, no, we have a source that it's not so. Why? Because Midi Isni Avodas Kechavim b'Sinai. Not the serve of Avodah Zarah was repeated for Yidden in Har Sinai. La Yilach Alekim Acheram Alpanai. It's in the Maseres HaDibros, this week's parasha. So it's repeated in Har Sinai. And V'ashkechon, and we see that although it's repeated, it applies to Goyim as well. Because we see the Anash Avodah Kechavim Milava. Goyim are being punished after Matan Torah for serving Avodah Zarah. Where do we see this? When the Yidden come into Eretz Yisrael, it says in the pasuk, the Eibishter says that the Canaanim and the nations living in the land are going to be expelled of the land. Why? Because they serve Avodah Zarah. So Shmami, no, this is our source to say that Lezeh or Lezeh Nemra, that when you see Avodah Zarah, which was said already before Matan Torah, and it was said to the Yidden by Matan Torah, and we see that the Goyim are still commanded not to serve Avodah Zarah, so that's our source to say that whatever is repeated before, whatever is repeated means that it's shaykh to Goyim as well. Rashi says that you find similar also b'negei to Gilui Arayis, because it also says the same thing regarding Gilui Arayis, that the Goyim are punished for this, even though it was repeated for Yidden after Matan Torah. Now the other cloud that Rabbi Yosef Reb Chanina said was Levnei Noach. If it was said in the Torah before for the Bnei Noach, V'loi Nishnas b'Sinai, it's not repeated by Matan Torah. L'Yisrael Nemra V'loi Lebnei Noach. So that means that it's only for Yidden and not for Goyim. In fact, the Gemara Adarabe here as well. Why wouldn't I maybe logically say that it's the other way around? Midoloi Nishnas b'Sinai. If this is something that's said before Matan Torah and it's not repeated then by Sinai for Yidden, Levnei Noach Nemra V'loi L'Yisrael. So maybe this is only for Goyim and not for Yidden. Answers the Gemara, that can't be, because lekim midam, there isn't a thing, the Yisrael shari, that by Yidden this is going to be allowed, and for Goyim it's not allowed. If it's something that says before Matan Torah, you can't say, the point here is that this is a unique mitzvah that's only for Goyim. And by Yidden, this mitzvah or this issa is not allowed. There's no such thing. If it's something which is also for Goyim, it has to be that it applies to Yidden as well. But the Gemara asks on this rule, V'loi, is there nothing that's allowed for Yidden and is still also for a guy? V'harei yefas toya, the halacha v'yefas toya. When you go out into war and you see a beautiful woman and you're allowed to have a relationship with her in war, even if she's an Eishes Ish. Sorry, this is a heter by Yidden. You don't find this heter by a guy, this is still also. Answers the Gemara, the reason is Hasa Mishom the Lav B'nei Kibush Ninu. That's because they don't have this mitzvah of kibush, of conquering the land, the way it applies to Yidden. Yidden are conquering the land, and over there, regarding coming and fighting a war to conquer the land, the Eibishter gave this heter. But like Goyim, since the reality doesn't apply, so the heter doesn't apply, but not that they wouldn't have this heter. Another question the Gemara asks, we brought before in the Gemara regarding Gzela, that Gzela by a Yid is only a Shava Pruta. By a guy, Gzela it applies even if it's less than a Shava Pruta. So we see that by a guy, there's an Isser that doesn't apply by a Yid. Answers the Gemara, Hossam, there the reason is, Mishum Belav, Menei, Mechilin, really by a Yid and the guy, the Isser of Gzela is the same. Elamai, the difference is that by a Yid and Rashi says, are Rachmanim. You have more compassion. So therefore, if someone takes something from you, which is less than a Shava Pruta, a Yid is Meichel. But Goyim, which are Chzarim, cruel, so by them, there's no Mechila, and that's why the Shava Pruta, the Gzela still applies. So it's really the same Isser of Gzela. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the first cloud that Rav Yosef Reb Chanina said, that Kol Mitzvah, Shenemra Livnei Noach, a mitzvah that already was said before Matan Torah for the Goyim. Then the Nishnas b'Sinai, it was repeated then after Matan Torah. Lezeh or lezeh nemra. This is a mitzvah that applies both to Yidden and to Goyim. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to go through details of mitzvahs where we find that it was repeated, but it's only for Yidden and not for Goyim. The mitzvah of Mila is said when the Yidden were by Avram Avinu. When Avram Avinu was still before Matan Torah in the state of a Ben Noach, you should keep my bris. And then the Mishnah is Bisina. It says it again in Parshas Tazria, where it says Ubayayim Hashmini Yimoil. And Li Yisrael Nem Rav Alay Lebnei Noach. And the mitzvah of bris Mila is only for Yidden and not for Goyim. But according to the rule we said, if it's repeated after Matan Torah, then it should be a mitzvah that applies for Yidden and for Goyim. So why is the mitzvah of Mila not for Goyim?
You also see that Avraham Avinu, he took advice from Mamre.
Yeah, okay.
So
Okay.
Mamre was a Goy also.
Okay, advice. Okay, but here the Gemara is asking regarding the mitzvah itself. And says the Gemara, it's not considered to be something that's repeated. Why not? Because Ahu, the only reason when it says it in Parshas Tazria, it says Uvayayim Hashmini L'Mishri Shabbos Udasa. It's just coming to say one detail, that the mitzvah of Bris Mila, when it's Bismani on the 8th day, it can be done on Shabbos as well. Bayayim Va'afila b'Shabbos. That's all it's coming to say. But the actual mitzvah is not being repeated a second time. So therefore we know that it's only for Yidden. Another question the Gemara asks from a different mitzvah. What's with the mitzvah of Piri V'Ribya? Having children. It's written in the Torah, this mitzvah already before Matan Torah. You should multiply and have children. V'nishna is b'Sinai. And then this mitzvah is repeated after Matan Torah. What does it say in the pasuk after Matan Torah? So before Matan Torah, for 3 days, there was the mitzvah of Perisha. He didn't have to separate from their wives. And then after Matan Torah, it says, Lechem mar lahem, shuvu lachem la lechem. That the Yidden should return to their tents. What does la alecha mean? They should return to their house, to their tents, to their wives, to have children. So here we see that the Torah repeated it after Matan Torah. So li Yisrael nemra v'lo levnei Noach. So I should say that over here, because it's repeated, it's a mitzvah that is only for Yidden and not for Goyim. So, but according to the klal that we said before, that something that's repeated, what should be the halacha? That it's for Yidden and for Goyim. So why over here we saying that this is a mitzvah that's only for Yidden and not for Goyim, the mitzvah of Piri V'Ribya? There is another mitzvah, another concept, which is not Piri V'Ribya, but there's the concept of L'Sheves Yitzara, that we're here in the world to settle the world. That concept of L'Sheves Yitzara applies to a guy as well. But Piri V'Ribya is a mitzvah that does not apply to a guy. But why not? If it's repeated, and we said the klal is if it's repeated, it does apply to a guy. And says the Gemara, this as well is not considered to be repeated, because Ahu, the pasuk that it says over here, go back to your tents, is not to repeat the mitzvah of Piri V'Ribya. It's coming to teach me something else. It's teaching me the following rule: L'chol davar shebeminyan, that anytime you have a bezdin that takes account and decrees something, tzarich minyan achel atira, you're going to have to bring the bezdin back and take account again to be mater, to undo that original isser that was in place. Udasa. This is what it's coming to teach me here. And how do I see this? Because here the Eibusher says they should separate from their wives for 3 days. That's it. So after the 3 days, the heter is automatic. They should be able to go back to their wives. But nevertheless, the Eibusher has to give a special command that they should go back to their wives. So that shows you that once there's a decree, once there's an isser, you can't undo the isser unless the Eibusher himself would say so. It's the same also with a bezdin, which makes a takana or a isser. You need to bring back the bezdin to undo this isser. That's what it's coming to teach. So it's not a repetition of Piri V'Ribya.
What the Gemara mentioned before concerning the Bris Milah, the Yom Hashmin, only Dafka Shabbos. But we have a klal that the reason why it's a mitzvah is Dafka because of Parsha Shmini. We can't learn from Avraham Avinu.
No, and Chanami. Yeah, but true, and Chanami. The Rambam, there's a famous Rambam in Pelech and Chulin, and that we do the mitzvah of Mila today because of Matan Torah, not because of before Matan Torah. Correct, and Chanami. Yeah, but what's written in the Torah before Matan Torah is for the Yidden after Matan Torah. That's the point that the Gemara is saying, that it's not repeated. Yom HaShmini is not considered to be repeated. What's written in the Torah before Matan Torah, it's now they took it away from the Goyim, and now the Eibusher says by Matan Torah that this mitzvah now is only for you. So when we fulfill the mitzvah of Mila today, because of what it says in Parshas Lech Lecha, is because of Matan Torah, not as it was before Matan Torah for the Goyim. Okay, now the Gemara asks, Ihachi, the Gemara asks the question, Ihachi, if so, Kol Chad v'Chad Nami Neime Mishum Milsa Isni. So why can't I say regarding what was mentioned before, that what was it mentioned before? Avidazare, Gilearayis. It was said before Matan Torah, and it was repeated after Matan Torah. So why can't I say regarding those as well that the fact that it was repeated is not a repetition? There's a certain chiddush that it's being set for afterwards. For example, by Avodah Zarah. It's not a repetition. The reason why it says Avodah Zarah after Matan Torah again is to say what the punishment of Avodah Zarah by Yidden would be, what the punishment of Gilei Arayis is, whether it's Kodesh, whether it's Mrs. Bezin. So why are we considering it to be a repetition? Answers the Gemara, Hachi Kamar. No, it is a repetition. And the reason is because Az-Zahara Meheder Misnaba, Lamali. So when it says the actual Isser itself, the warning not to serve Avodah Zarah or the Isser of Gilei Arayis, that is actually a repetition. So even though the punishment and other details that it adds is not a repetition, but the actual warning itself is a repetition. Masha'enkin, when it comes to Mila and Periviribya, over here, there is no repetition at all. It's just the word Bayayim or Laholechem teaching me something else. So there's no repetition at all by this. One more detail, the Gemara explains in what it said in the Braisa before. It said, "Va'ein lanu elo gid anashe bovad." The only one that we find that was said once and it's not repeated after Matan Torah, and therefore this is a mitzvah that's only for Yidden. The only one that you find is gid anashe, v'aliba de Rabbi Yehuda, and according to Rabbi Yehuda. But now the Gemara asks, based on what we just said, Hani nami loy isni. Avodah Zarah, Gilei Arayis. These are also l'chayre avedas isurim that were not repeated after Matan Torah, because, or actually, sorry, the Gemara is not referring to Avodah Zarah and Gilei Arayis. The Gemara is referring to what we just mentioned before, Mila and Periviribya. Mila and Periviribya are also examples that were really not repeated, even though it seems like it was repeated in Parshas Lech Lecha and then in Parshas Tazria. But the Gemara explained before, it's not really a repetition. What it says later is just for one detail, for Shabbos. And said by Periviribya, it's really not a second repetition of Periviribya, it's saying something else. So why are we saying that Gid Anoshe is the only one that was not repeated? You have Mila and Periviribya as well. And says the Gemara, Hani isni l'shum milsa ba'alma. The fact is that by Mila and Periviribya, it is repeated. True, it's repeated for a certain chiddush in it, and therefore it's not considered to be a repetition. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina was saying that there's only one example of a mitzvah that's not repeated at all. That it says it only once before Matan Torah, that's Gid Anoshe, it doesn't repeat it at all, no details about it afterwards, and this is the mitzvah that applies only for Yidden and not for Goyim. And now the Gemara goes back to the original question of this discussion here, the klal that we said that when it comes to a mitzvah that's repeated, that's a mitzvah that applies to Yidden and Goyim. So what was the Gemara's question on this? Mila is also a mitzvah that seemingly is repeated, and it's only for Yidden and not for Goyim. So here the Gemara gives a second answer. Another answer I could say, why mitzvah of Mila is only for Yidden? Mila me'ikara la'Avram u'dekamazah le'rachmana. If you look at the psukim, what it says over there, when the Eibishter commands Avram Avinu the mitzvah of bris Mila, it's clear that he's telling him that this is a mitzvah that's only for your descendants, because it says va'ata es brisi tishmer ata v'zaracha acharecha l'doiraisam. Ata v'zaracha in, it's you and your descendants that are obligated in this mitzvah, in a shachrin ilai, but somebody else is not obligated. So you don't have to give the answer the Gemara said before. You could say Bayem Hashmini Yimel B'Sar Losai is a repetition of mitzvahs Mila, but already in the pasuk in Parshas Lech Lecha it clarifies that it's a mitzvah only for Yidden. In fact, the Gemara, but if it's all just based on this lashon of the pasuk Ata v'zaracha, so if Elameyata, if so, B'nei Yishmael l'chayvu. Part of the descendants of Avram Avinu is the Bnei Yishmael. They should also be chayiv in the mitzvah of bris Mila. Why is it only for Yidden? Answers the Gemara, because it says, Ki Yitzchak yikara l'chazara. Who is really considered to be the zera of Avram Avinu? It's only Yitzchak, but not the Bnei Yishmael. They're not the zera of Avram Avinu. Now, nevertheless, Avram Avinu gave the mitzvah of Mila, he fulfilled it with Yishmael himself. Yishmael himself was his child, and he fulfilled the mitzvah with him. And the reason is not because he's Zaracha, because there's another mitzvah of Yilid Boyis, someone that lives in your home, Eved, Niknas Kaspai, that you have to do the mitzvah of Bris Mila. Even a Yilid Boyis, Yishmael lived by Avram Avinu, so he gave him a bris. But Yishmael's children, though, are not Zaracha, and therefore the mitzvah of bris does not apply to them. Only Yitzchak is Zaracha. Maskefla Ravaishi asks in this, Elameyato, but the question still remains, Avram Avinu had other children. B'nei Keturah loy l'chayvo. The B'nei Keturah should not be chayv in the mitzvah of bris Mila. So the B'nei Keturah were the children that Avram Avinu had afterwards when he actually married Hagar properly. Before, Hagar was just a shifcha. And then he married her again, and she was then called Keturah, and she had 6 children. So these B'nei Keturah should be chayv in the mitzvah of bris Mila. The Gemara is asking that the B'nei Keturah should not be chayiv in the mitzvah of bris Mila. Why? Because they're not part of Zaracha. But Avram Avinu definitely gave a bris to his children from Keturah. It's not exactly clear from where we know this, but this is what Rashi says. Avraham Avinu definitely gave a bris to the children of Keturah, but the question is why? If they're not zaracha, why did he have to give them a bris? That's the Gemara's question. One second. So the question of the Gemara, according to Rashi, is specifically about the Bnei Keturah themselves. That the Bnei Keturah should be chayiv should not be chayiv in the bris because they're not part of zaracha. But according to the Rambam and others, the Ran and others, they say that the Gemara is asking not about the Bnei Keturah themselves. Bnei Keturah themselves got a bris because they were the children of Avraham Avinu. But the question is about the descendants of the Bnei Keturah, the future generations. Why that they should not be chayiv in the mitzvah of bris milah. So on this the Gemara answers, Ha'omer Rabbi Yosi bar Oven, V'teimer Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina, as brisi heifar. There's an extra pasuk where it adds again and it says as brisi heifar. It says that when you get chorus, it already said this before in the pasuk. Why does it repeat it again? L'rabbis b'nei keturah. This comes to say that the b'nei keturah are chayiv and mitzvahs bris milah. So according to Rashi, this means that the actual b'nei keturah, only the 6 children that Avraham had from keturah, are chayiv and mitzvahs bris milah. But according to the Rambam, and the Rambam paskins this la'alocha and hilchas malachim, the Bnei Keturah refers to all the descendants of Keturah and all future generations. They're chayiv and mitzvahs bris milah. Not only that, the Rambam goes on to say that it's not only Bnei Keturah. He says since today the Bnei Yishmael and the Bnei Keturah got mixed with one another, so all the Bnei Yishmael are chayiv and mitzvahs bris milah as well for this reason. And there's a famous question that the Shagas Arya asks about this. The Shagas Arya says, if that's the case, so then you should say that all the Goyim should be chayiv and mitzvahs bris milah, because we don't know exactly who b'nei Keturah, who b'nei Yishmael, who b'nei Esav, we don't know anybody. So they should all be chayiv in mitzvahs bris milah. And the Mefarshim add to that even more. You're going to say that we know that Sanhedrin came and was mevalvel kol ha'olam kuloi, and therefore when you see a guy, you can just say you follow the Rav. Rav Goyim do not come from b'nei Keturah, and therefore they should be potter. But the concept of Rav does not exist by Goyim. Rav is a psak of Torah that applies only by Yidden, not by Goyim. So therefore, by a guy that could be from the Bnei Keturah should be chayiv in mitzvahs bris milah. This is a famous shaila that the Shagas Arya asks on the Shitta of the Rambam that says that the Bnei Keturah is chayiv. There's a whole discussion about this. There's many answers to this, but this is the Shagas Arya's question.
I can say let them do it. Put the guys out.
Yeah.
We know that Rashi held that Keturah and Hagar were the same.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
So I'm saying but the mitzvah of bris milah by Yishmael was when it happened to be. He was 13 at the time, so that's what they hold.
Still doing it at 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still doing it at 13.
Okay, let's go weiter. Talk to Gemara. Rav Yudah Amar Rav. Rav Yudah said in the name of Rav, Adam Marishain lo yehuter lo basar la'achila. Adam Marishain, he was not allowed to eat any meat. The pasuk says, Lachem yeh la'achla, or l'chol chayis haaretz, that this will be for you to eat. And it says there in the pasuk, it's referring to the asev and things that grow, the vegetables, whatever it is. And then l'chol chayis haaretz, and the animals eat as well. But v'loi chayis haaretz lachem. However, the meat from the animals, that is not for you to eat. But then the children of Noach, after the Mabul, hit to them. Then the Eibishter said that they're allowed to eat from basar, from the meat of animals. Shenem, as the pasuk there says, Ki yerek esev nesati lachem, I give you to eat from all the animals of the world. It says in the pasuk, kol remes, kol chai, it should be to you to eat, just like the grass that you can eat. So then that you're like Ki yerek esev nesati lachem es koil. Yachel, I would think, lo yehei evim menachai noyig boy. That what this means is that now it's permitted for bnei Noach to eat anything from an animal, including a limb that falls off from an animal while it's alive. Talmud Laima, so the pasuk says, Ach basar benafshei damai lo yisachelu. That the basar of the nefesh, meaning when it's still alive, that you're not allowed to eat. Yachel af l'shratzim, I would think that the isser of evim menachai applies even to a limb from a sheretz, a creeping animal. Talmud Laima ach. But it says in the pasuk the word ach, which is an exclusion, and that means that we don't include in this shratzim by shratzim the isser of evim and achai does not apply. But now the Gemara explains, how do you know that the exclusion of the word ach refers to shratzim? Umay talmudah. What's the source of the limud of the word ach? So Rav Hona explains, and we had this before a few times, that when it says here the extra word of domai, it says ach basa benafshay domai lo yisachelu. Why does it say that word domai? Domai, the dam is where the nefesh is, where the life of the animal is. What is domai coming to say? Mi she domai chaluk mipsadai. Only a large animal that the nature is, it has the flesh, and then there's the blood, and the blood is where the life is, and it's two separate things. There, the Isser of Evim Achai applies. Yatsu shratzim shein damim chaluk mipsaram. When it comes to a sheretz, the blood and the basar is one and the same thing. It's not different. Over there, the Isser of Evim Achai does not apply, and the halacha actually is by the dam of a sheretz that if you eat blood from a sheretz, there's no Isser Kodesh for this, because it's not the dam that the Torah is speaking about. The Gemara asks in this a few questions. How could you say that by Adam Rishon and the Bnei Noach, until Noach, by Adam Rishon they weren't allowed to eat any basar? Meisvei asks, what does the Eibusha tell Adam Rishon? Uredu b'dgas hayam, and you have control over the fish in the water. Now, what is this referring to? When the Eibusha benches him and says Uredu b'dgas hayam, my lav lachila, don't you think he's telling him that you can eat from the fish? So when it says that they could only eat from grass or from what grows and fruits and so on, but over here it says Redu b'dgas hayam, says the Gemara, no, it doesn't mean to eat for eating. It means that you can use the fish for work, to do work for you. In fact, the Gemara, how could that be? You could do any work with fish. So the Gemara says, yes, it's possible. Like Rachba asked the Ibaya about this, the boy Rachba asked the following interesting Ibaya. The halacha is that you're not allowed to have you can't have two animals that are together leading and to plow or whatever it is together. So he asked the question, Hinig be'izav v'shibuta. If you have your wagon and you have a goat and you're going at the edge of the river, and you have a goat that's pulling your wagon, and you also have a fish that's swimming, that you attach your wagon to this fish that pulls your wagon. What's going to be the halacha? Does the Isser of Kalayim apply over here? So you see that if you're right at the edge of the river and you can attach to a fish, and the fish could do this work to pull your wagon. Another ayah the Gemara asks, Tashema, and the pasuk it says, Uva'oif hashamayim, Uredu, that Adam Rishon has control over the birds. What does this mean? My lav lachila. Don't you think it means that he has the heter to eat from them? Says the Gemara, it's not for eating, l'malacha, it's for work. Like the Gemara, the birds can do work. Says the Gemara, they could. The boy Rabbi Baravona asked the following Gebaya regarding dosh. When one is threshing, so there's the lav, you're not allowed to muzzle the animal when you're threshing. So he asked the Shaila about vazan v'tarna gailin, by the geese or by chickens, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, what's going to be the halacha over here? Will the issur of muzzling the animals when you're threshing, will this apply as well? This is according to Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, that the Kedrash here brings all the details about this. But here you clearly see that you have the concept of a geese or a chicken doing work for you. That's what the Redu means regarding the Oif HaShemayim. Toshema, another ayah from the same pasuk there, it says Uvachal chaya remesas ala aretz, that the chaya that is crawling on the land. This is talking about creeping animals, and over here it says that you have control over this, and this is certainly for eating. What else is it for? It's for work. These animals that are crawling on the ground can do work for you. And says the Gemara, actually yes, because Aula Suya Nachoshudasa. This refers to the snake, the way he was in the beginning of creation. That snake, which is a chayre meses, was able to serve and do work. The Tanyas we learned in the Brayso of Shim ben Menashe, Chaval al Shamish Gadol she'avad min ha'olam. It's a big loss for the great servant that was lost from the world after Chet Eitzadas. Shalmala niskalkol nachash. If not for the fact that he ruined his existence by sinning by the Eitzadas, kolech v'achad mi Yisrael. So for every single yid, the Eibusha would give him two good snakes that would serve him. One snake he would send to the north, another snake he sent to the south, to bring him these precious stones, other kinds of precious gems and pearls, to bring him everything he needs. To make him rich. These are exactly. And not only this, they can connect a ritzua, strap under its tail, and the snake can do work for you and bring out earth to your garden and to your place where you have to build. They can do work for you on a construction site. So that shows that when it says chayare meses, it refers to the snake, and therefore, but not for eating. So therefore, by Adam Rishon, he was not allowed to eat any basar. One second. Let's just finish the Gemara. The Gemara asks from another Brayso. Meisvei, Hoya Rabbi Yehuda ben Teima. Rabbi Yehuda ben Teima said, it says in the Brayso as follows. Rabbi Yehuda ben Teima said, Adam Rishon meisev began Eden, Hoya, Adam Arishain was sitting, reclining in the Gan Eden. V'hoyu, Malachi Asharis, Tzaylon lo basad, Malachi Asharis roasted meat for him, Umesanin lo yayin, and they poured him wine as well. They sifted the wine for him. And then what happened? Hits it by Nachash. The Nachash took a look, and saw the honor of Adam Rishon in Gan Eden, and he was jealous of him. And that's why he brought him to eat from the Eitz Hadas, and that was the downfall of Adam. So what do we see here? Rabbi Yehuda ben Taima said that Adam Rishon in Gan Eden was eating basar. And says the Gemara, "Asam b'basar yerid ben hashamayim." That wasn't natural basar that comes from animals. This was basar that came from heaven that the Eibishter gave him, and that was a basar that he was allowed to eat. Fragt the Gemara, "Miyike basar yerid ben hashamayim?" Is there basar that comes down ben hashamayim? Where do we find such a thing? And says the Gemara, yes, we find this. Kihad Rab Shimon ben Chalafta. We find this by Rab Shimon ben Chalafta. He was going on his way. So these lions came and encountered him. And they're roaring by him. It's a big danger. They'll come and attack him and eat him up. So Amar, he said, the pasuk, Hakfirim shoygim latoref, that the lions, they roar for the ones that they go to attack. When he said this pasuk, what happened? Nechisule tarti etmasa. So 2 pieces of meat came down from heaven. Chade achlua. One of them, these lions that were going to attack him, ate up. And v'chade shavkua. And one of them, they left. So I say, he took it with him, he brought it, and v'asala bei medrasha. He came to the Besmedish with this piece of meat that fell down from heaven for him. It saved his life. So Allah, so Rav Shimon Chalafta asked a question about this piece of meat. Dover Tomei huzeh or Dover Tor? What's the halacha of this piece of meat? Is it impure or is it pure? Amrulay, they said to him, Ein Dover Tomei yored min hashamayim. No impurity comes down from heaven. So if this is meat that was a miracle that came down from heaven, it's pure. Now, based on this, Rab Zera asked from Rab Avo, the Shaila, Yardulay Dumus Chamayr Mahu. If meat comes down from heaven, but it comes down in the form of a donkey, which is a non-kosher animal, which is a tomei animal. So what's the halacha with this meat? Is it kosher? Is it tomei or toy? Amarlei. So Rabbi Avo said to Rab Zera, Yarod Nala, you're like a foolish snake. I think that's a Taichi Yad. Rashi says Tanin Shaita. Okay, yeah. Okay, so he says why? Because he said to him Ha'amri. They already said Ha'amri. They already answered. Abshum Chalafta Ein David Tamei Yored Min Hashamayim. It doesn't make a difference in what shape it comes down. There's no David Tamei that comes down Min Hashamayim. Okay, so therefore it's Tahir as well. Okay.